And like,
Yeah.
you're the most important resource in your business. If you are not financially resourced, how long can this business go on? Women aren't allowed to make as many mistakes as men are in our culture. She knows that this is the thing that's going to unlock her next level, but she's really struggling trusting herself. Where is that mistrust coming from for you?
Welcome to the Entrepreneur Podcast, filled with marketing and leadership tips on launching and growing your business with your host, Deanne Mora.
Today on the podcast, we're going to talk about money, how to make it, protect it, and grow it. Now, money can sometimes be a taboo subject, particularly with women, but today we'll lay it all on the table. I have the pleasure of welcoming Megan Hale. As the powerhouse behind Dream Money, she's on a mission to supercharge solo entrepreneurs with a special focus on empowering women. Now, Megan brings a fresh perspective to financial planning, emphasizing financial psychology. Welcome to the podcast, Megan.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for our convo today.
I am too. I think this is going to be really, really exciting and really valuable for our listeners. So let's start with a little bit about your journey. How did you go from being a psychotherapist to a business mentor for entrepreneurs?
Yeah, well, I was a very special kid, I would say, because by the time I was 15, I actually knew that what I wanted to do, which was to be a psychotherapist. It's the first time I ever saw a therapist around that time when I was experiencing anxiety and depression as a teenager. And I knew that I wanted to go into private practice. And so that's what I did. So I spent the next 15 years going and getting all my schooling and opened my private practice when I was 30 and didn't realize at the time that I was stepping into entrepreneurship. I don't know why I hadn't connected those dots, but there was a lot of freedom and creativity and getting to make your own schedule and set your own rules and really thinking about the values that you wanted to live by and choosing the people that you served and all those things. But I was also married to active duty military at the time, so I knew when I opened my private practice that I would have to close it 18 months later. And that was when I realized I'm not going to open a private practice every 3 years because that's a lot of work to build your clientele, just to leave it and all those things. And so I started getting curious around that time of how I could translate my skills and my training and education into a different field. And that's when I found the world of online coaching. And so I made the leap back in 2015 and haven't looked back since. I started off doing more life coaching until I had a very important shift in my own business in 2018. And then I started moving into the business coaching arena since then. I've been in that space ever since. And to now be a fintech founder who owns a software company, if you would have told me that when I was starting this journey, I'm
Yeah.
like, what? And especially about money, because I had a horrible relationship with money. And so the fact that I'm doing this work now and the business model that I'm in now, like I could not have anticipated, but I'm so joyful and fulfilled being able to do this work and help others and creating all the success that I have for myself and even more success than I've created yet for myself.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what really that's what entrepreneurship is all about, is if you can find a way to do what you love and get paid for it, I don't see how it can possibly get any better than that. But, we know that the majority of small businesses will fail before they ever really get traction, and a lot of that comes down to money. And I think, especially in today's economy, which is tough for many of our entrepreneurs, so thinking about all the challenges that we're going through today and maybe entrepreneurship in general, but particularly now, what should our mindset be? And what are some of the strategies that we should be thinking about when it comes to our financial health?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest challenges in entrepreneurship is creating financial stability for yourself and knowing that you can pay yourself consistently. It's probably one of the biggest headaches that so many of us face, and really trying to figure out how do I create that reliable cash flow for myself. And so that's already present no matter what kind of season that we're in. But now that we're in this market where there is so much more unpredictability, I think a lot of us are feeling that uncertainty even more. And so I think there's a couple of things. I think one, really understanding your numbers and understanding your minimum viable revenue of what is that bare minimum number that has to come in for things to keep going, for you to get paid. That's a number that we all need to know as entrepreneurs, especially now, because that's going to be your shining light of like, okay, bare minimum, I know that this is the number I have to reach. What is my strategy for reaching that number? So that is key. I think the second thing is realizing that we have a lot of agency. We're resourceful as entrepreneurs. We have gone through difficult times before, and we can go through difficult times again. But to really ground your mindset and not get spun up in all the what ifs and unknowns, because there are so many what ifs and unknowns. And especially if you're here in the US, you know that our current administration is making a decision one day that has huge impacts on small business owners and then walking back those decisions just 3 or 4 days later. So it's a lot of back and forth right now, right? And so trying to stay grounded in all of that and have contingency plans, I think, is one way that we can kind of cope with some of this uncertainty. But honestly, you got to be really fluid and you got to be adaptable and know that this is just the season that we're in.
Yeah. And when you talk about minimum viable revenue, let's expand on that a little bit more. So is that I just take all of my current expenses and say, I'm assuming that I'm keeping them all, or is there some structured way to go through and say, do I really need this? Should I be cutting back this? I mean, so how deeply should we be looking at our expenses in a time like this? And how do you get to what your minimal viable revenue is?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good practice of running your business as lean as possible always. But especially when we're going through a season like this, it's like, let's go through all of our operating costs right now. Like, are we using everything that we're paying for? Because if you're not, this is one way of reallocating that money and finding money in your business. So that's step one. Like, let's lean out expenses as much as possible. And that's just a good practice at any time, but especially now. But when I'm thinking about minimum viable revenue, I'm not just thinking about like, let's just get by. I'm really thinking about 7 key financial needs that create financial stability for us. And so it's not just your operating costs. We have to look at your team costs and making sure that your team is running as efficiently as possible. We also have to look at what you're currently reinvesting back into your business right now. Is this a season to continue reinvesting at the level that you have been, or should you kind of be paring back just for the season until you have a little bit more clarity on what in the world is going on? We also kind of think about business savings. Like, we want to make sure that in that minimum viable revenue, we're asking our business to set aside a little bit extra. So it's there if and when we need it. And if you don't have business savings already, we can still prioritize that even in this market when we're calculating your minimum viable revenue goal. We also want to make sure your taxes are covered, because they're going to ask for their money. It does not matter what is happening in this season, right? So that's your key financial need there. Of course, your personal pay is number one. And then we also think about having a give back. And I know that might seem a little odd in a season where it's like there's so much coming at us, but I have found over the years, even prioritizing giving in the hard years allows you to stay in that place of abundance of like, I'm still able to give back. There's more than enough to go around. So when we're thinking about that minimum viable revenue, we're really thinking about those 7 key financial needs when we're getting to that number for you.
And I heard you say something that I'm not sure all entrepreneurs necessarily do for themselves when you listed all of those, and that's make sure that you're paying yourself, because I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs that just like they cover everything and it's like, well, whatever's I'll get whatever's left over. But I think I'm hearing you say, no, I need to plan for what I need to get out of the business. And that's part of the minimum. That's just that it is. That's not what we're going to compromise on. Is that
it is
what I'm hearing?
so easy. I see entrepreneurs do this all the time where they'll forego paying themselves. Like, they're the first things that they cut. And like, you're the most important resource in your business. If you are not financially resourced, how long can this business go on? So I take a very different approach of prioritizing you first and foremost. You have got to get paid for your business. You are carrying everything, right? And so how can we put you at the forefront when we're really thinking about that minimum viable revenue that has to come in?
Yeah, absolutely. Really, really key. So, and especially in times of challenge as we are right now, but I think even in general, and I experienced this from, years of working in corporate America before I had my agency, that I think that men and women tend to have different approaches when it comes to risk and money. Men will just say, here's my final offer and go for it. Women might be a little bit more reserved. Times like now, there may be, men who are looking at this as, oh, it's a fire sale. I'm going to go and grab more market share. And women are like, oh my goodness, I need to save and pull back. So like, talk to me a little bit more about the differences between men and women how we approach money, what are some of these biases or risk tolerances that we need to think about and consciously make an effort to overcome?
Yeah, I mean, this is really where financial psychology shows up because men and women tend to have very different financial psychologies because we've been conditioned very differently in our culture. Men are really raised to go out and earn and invest and provide for, right? And so they are put on a very different financial track than women are because women are conditioned to save, to minimize, to manage money, not necessarily go out and earn money, and definitely don't take financial risk. Because if you were to fail as a woman with a risk, the kickback on that as a woman is so much more severe. Women aren't allowed to make as many mistakes as men are in our culture, unfortunately. We're not held to this, men are not held to the same standard as women. Women are also more likely to be seen as frivolous or irresponsible with money and more superficial with money than men too. And so, of course, there's a fear around taking risk as women as a result of that. What if we make a mistake? What if we get something wrong? As an entrepreneur, as you know, though, there is a great deal of risk taking involved in order to create the kind of success that you want. You oftentimes have to spend money in order to make money. You have to hire that coach or take that program or put yourself in different rooms to get access to the information and the network that you need. And it might not make logical sense on paper. And so having a good sense of your numbers and really understanding what your earning strategy is, trusting that you know how to earn money, trusting that you can take financial risk, and even if you fail, you can pick yourself back up from that, I think are critical, absolutely necessary skills that we have to be developing as women. And it's very countercultural to how a lot of us were raised.
But how? Right? I mean, that's the challenge, right? Because these are biases that might have come to us since we were little children.
Yeah.
So, how do you work? So when you work with a woman who is, you're feeling that perhaps she's not taking the risks that would actually help her business, and it's more of an emotional
Hmm.
barrier that's holding her back. How do you help her to break through that?
Yeah, I think a lot of times it's shifting our focus on the evidence that we're looking for because a lot of us are so focused on the bad things that could happen and not necessarily seeing the reward or the positive things that could happen, and also looking for models that reinforce the new beliefs that you're wanting to step into. So for instance, if you have a fear that, and also like past traumas, past financial mistakes show up in this too. So, for instance, if a client is really scared of making an investment, but she knows that this is the thing that's going to unlock her next level, but she's really struggling trusting herself, where is that mistrust coming from for you? And it's going to be unique to all of us, right? She might have made an investment decision in the past that didn't pan out. So she's trusting that she has sound judgment to make the right investment for her business. She might have a family member who made an investment and lost everything. And now she's scared that's going to happen for her. So it's really examining where that belief, that fear is coming from for that particular person, and then challenging that belief, right? And then starting to open up other possibilities that could be her reality if she were to make that bold move and take that bold risk.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And one of the things that I heard you say when you were answering my last question that I want to just double click on for a moment, because it really resonated with me, is the network to get to the next level.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the things that, I think, again, if we're talking about the differences between men and women, men are more likely to, have buddies at the club, at the golf course, they're going to talk about business
Yes.
and, women may not do that as frequently. It could be that there's a financial barrier to the price of entry, right? A lot of these organizations, some of them are not cheap.
Yes.
But so tell me a little bit about the network and, how to approach that and how to think about that as an entrepreneur.
I think a couple things show up around putting yourself in different rooms. One is sometimes financial commitments, but sometimes finances aren't even a part of it. Some of these communities are free. Some of these people are accessible to you. You just have to start building, like reaching out and building a relationship with them. And I think in those circumstances, it's really elevating yourself to see yourself belonging in those spaces. And it's really interesting when you get into the research, like even for like job applications. I can't remember like the exact stats, and I wish that I could in this moment, but women tend to make sure that they can meet 90% of all the qualifications before they'll actually apply, where I think men is like 50 or something like that. Like it's a very big range. But I think that we do a very similar thing when it's thinking about the people that we admire and look up to. We tend to put these women or men even on pedestals of like, I could never be, in their community. I can never be friends with them. I can never be on that level. It's like the only person who's deciding that is you. So it's really an inner work job of you have to start seeing yourself as someone at that level, at that caliber. And of course you belong there. Who said you didn't? And so many times we count ourselves out before we even give ourselves a chance.
And is it a fake it till you make it kind of scenario, or what's the approach when, so let's say you decide I'm going to go for it, I'm going to join this organization, and maybe there's a little bit of uncertainty that you have about traveling in those circles.
Yeah.
Or it doesn't even necessarily have to be traveling in those circles, but how do I personally I found networking to be just a huge putting gasoline on the fire for my business. And it's, one of the things that I've experienced with networking, and I don't know if this is something that you've also found, but once you're kind of in the circle, you'll get an introduction and there's no competition. It's like, oh,
Yes.
so-and-so introduced you. You must be good. Let's do business together. And it's that
Absolutely.
simple. You're not answering RFPs. You're not bidding against anyone. You're just like, handshake. Okay. Yeah. When do we
Yeah.
start?
You're
And,
chosen.
it's amazing. But
Agree.
how do you coach someone to get there?
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, I don't really believe in the fake it till you make it because there's this sense of like you're trying to be somebody you're not. And that is going to obviously bring up imposter syndrome for a lot of us when we're trying to put on an air that we've created this level of success that maybe we haven't yet, or whatever that might be. I think my approach is really helping people ground into the value that they bring and the wisdom that they hold and seeing the value in that. Because that way you're just like, here's what I'm adding. Here's my contribution that I know is in my wheelhouse. This is my lane. This is my area of expertise, and just owning that. And even just owning what it is that you bring is such a journey for so many of us of starting to take up space and starting to really see ourselves as like, I'm a big deal. I'm a big deal. And it doesn't have to come across as like this arrogant thing. It's just really owning what you bring to the table. And if you can stand in that, these networking conversations, like it just becomes so much easier.
So read your own resume, sit with it for a minute and say, yeah, I did that. I should feel
Yes.
proud of that, right?
Yes.
Now,
Absolutely.
so the a lot of business owners are either they're forced to pivot or they're trying to take advantage of a market opportunity and they decide to pivot. And getting into a little bit of psychology here, I know you talk about nervous system regulation and marketing and entrepreneurship. So, tell us a little bit about more about that, especially when it comes to either a launch or a big pivot. How does that impact us and how does that work?
Oh my gosh. I feel like I'm like, there's 9 million ways I could take this conversation. I think one thing that I want people to know is that your nervous system plays such a big role in what you feel ready to say yes to. And I think you have to really understand how your nervous system works and when it's giving you that feedback, because it's really easy for us to see fear as a thought point of like, this is too much. I shouldn't go forward. When fear can be perceived, like can be, what's the word I'm looking for? And fear can be interpreted, right, from a very different lens of like, oh, this is interesting. It's pushing my edges. It's pushing my edge. I haven't done this before. This is new for me. What would happen if I'm on the other side of that? So your nervous system for me is about finding that growth edge. Because if you do push yourself too far too soon, the risk is that your nervous system will shut you down. And it can elicit a shame spiral where you have to go and do all this work because now you feel bad about having the shame spiral to begin with that you then have to build yourself back up from. But when we can really say, okay, here is what feels really scary, and then just taking a little bit of a breath more, like, and pushing yourself just beyond that, that's where the real growth happens. And so when you're willing to commit to that, that's when we can do all the nervous system practices of starting to regulate our nervous system about this next level we're stepping into. And so a lot of that for me, it's going to depend on how your body works and how your nervous system, calms down. But for me, there's a lot of breath work involved with starting to find that comfort and safety when I'm feeling a little scared, a little uneasy, and holding myself there, staying in the room for the hard stuff and not walking away. There's a lot of thought work that shows up around when that fear is talking. What are the new beliefs that are my invitation to step into here and remind myself of this is like the future version of me who already has this figured out. What is she telling herself? What is she believing about this moment? How is she walking through that moment? And almost borrowing confidence from that future self to the current version of me right now, who's kind of freaking out inside. Because we can absolutely calm these sensations that we're feeling and find steadiness here. But it really does take a lot of awareness. Breath work, affirmations, physical practices are really helpful here too. And before you know it, that thing that you were scared of just becomes your new normal. You do it all the time.
So it almost sounds like you're saying that when you're in a position of discomfort, like I know I'm pushing myself outside of my element, to just pause for a moment and almost step outside yourself and sort of assess what's going on, reaffirm, go back to, all the good stuff that you told yourself when you read your resume
Yes.
and go back and kind of reflect on that and say, yes, I am a badass. I can do this, and then
Yeah.
just move forward.
And I think it's not, I mean, a capability is really important, reminding yourself of how capable you are. But I think it's really trusting yourself that you got it. Like if the worst case were to happen, you will be okay. Because I
Hmm.
think a lot of us, we tend to catastrophize things quite easily, that if XYZ happens, then this terrible thing is going to happen. No wonder your nervous system is like, danger, danger, stop. Like, we're not doing that. And so it's reminding yourself, like, even if that were to happen, I'd be okay. I've been okay before. And you play back all the past times that you picked yourself up and you've done all the hard things. And it's like, if you can do all of that, you can do this thing too that may or may not even happen.
So that's really interesting because, we hear about these schools of thoughts of, the power of positive thinking, and we just need to, positive, positive, positive. And if you have a negative thought, cancel it out and pretend that it didn't, it
Yep.
wasn't there, and move on. But I'm hearing something different from you. I'm hearing just take a moment, go, if your brain goes to that crazy place and you're like, oh my God, I could lose my business, I could lose, whatever, and go,
Yeah.
okay, and then what would I do? All
Yes.
right, I could deal, there is an avenue. Now I can go back to being positive and moving forward because I'm not letting
Yes.
that fear pull me into a dark place.
I'm so glad that you caught that, because I think a lot of times so many of us bypass the fears that are coming up that actually really need to be addressed. They need a contingency plan for us to really create that deep sense of safety. Otherwise, it's a false sense of safety and we're not going to feel truly confident. And that's when we take the step forward and we're like, whoa, I'm like really not prepared, right? So I'm really glad that you said that and named it, because it is really important. And a lot of people don't, and maybe it's just from being a therapist, right? Of when we're having anxiety or fear about something, we don't just pretend it doesn't exist and just have like these positive affirmations. We learn how to sit with it and talk with it and hold it and explore it and have a contingency plan for that thing. And it's not to say like we go and have 9 million contingency plans, because there is a line here where we start to step into hypervigilance, which is not healthy. But as CEOs, I think it's really important that you can see things from a holistic perspective. You see the inherent risks, you know what you're walking yourself into, because that's going to allow you to take the best risks, the best, most informed risks of knowing what you're really saying yes to.
That makes a lot of sense. So if someone listening, maybe they're feeling overwhelmed or they're feeling stuck in their business, you've talked about some different tools, but what would you say to them today? Like, what's the first thing that you should do if you're like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm going to do next?
I hope I don't sound like a broken record, but I'm such a numbers person, because I think our numbers always tell us a story. So if you're feeling stuck, the first thing is, where are you trying to get to? Your numbers are your North Star. They're telling you, here's what we need to have happen in the business. So you have to be clear on that first part first. Then you have to think about, what's my strategy of getting there? Out of this strategy, is there something that's not working? Like, we have to start asking ourselves, like a scientist, getting clear on what's the thing that really needs to change. Because I think a lot of times our overwhelm stems from feeling like everything's out of control, nothing's working. And that's not true. It's never all or nothing, right? So really getting to the heart of like, here's what I'm trying to have happen. Here's the issues that I need to solve, because business success, business growth is really all around solving the right problems. So our job as CEOs is to identify what problem it is that we need to solve that's going to help us get unstuck. And then we can start eliciting the right support for that problem or what have you, or maybe we can figure it out ourselves, But I think for me, anytime I'm starting to feel really frustrated or stuck, it's like, okay, let's come back to the foundations. the foundations are there to support you and to save you and to kind of reorient you and start rebuilding back to where you want to go.
Makes sense. It sounds somewhat analogous to your advice when it comes to, if you're in a situation where personally you're feeling, uncertain, you're feeling like this is beyond you, to sort of take a breath, step back, assess the situation, and then step back in and go for it. It's almost similar to, you need to step out of your business for a minute, pretend that it was a friend's business. And if they handed you their books and talked to you about, all the challenges that they're facing, what advice would you give them? Because it's, I feel like a lot of times entrepreneurs, they kind of know the answer already. Maybe they just don't want to deal with it. Maybe they're just not, taking a breath and they get into busy work and they don't take the time to actually, assess the business for what it is, that it's not, it's not an emotional extension of me. It's an entity that I need to make decisions.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I think one of the issues that so many of us have is that business feels so personal for us because it is. I mean, we put so much of our heart and our soul into our business, especially if you're the primary breadwinner. That's additional financial pressure that you're also carrying as an entrepreneur, and that's very real, right? It's very real experience for people. And so of course, when things are not going well, it's really easy to be like, well, if I don't turn this ship around, we create all this urgency, and the urgency creates pressure. And anytime we're experiencing pressure, all of our executive functioning starts to short circuit a little bit. So our work is actually, how do we minimize the pressure so we can think clearly? We create more spacious timelines. If you can really get a grasp on that, I really feel like that's a foundational principle of driving, very intentional strategy for your business, because nobody likes to feel urgency. It's a very scary place for our brains to be. So how can we mitigate that? And it opens up a whole new world and a whole new feeling to approach your business from.
Yeah, I like that. So let's be positive. Let's talk about scaling. So let's say we have opportunities here, we have opportunities to grow. So what are some of the key systems or structures that you believe that every business owner needs to have in place in order to scale sustainably?
I think one of the things that people get wrong around scaling is the importance of stabilizing what you already have first. And what I mean by that is, when I'm working with business owners, I'm really clear on what is the way we're creating financial stability for you, and how simple and streamlined is that? Because a lot of people have overly complicated business models in order to generate like just minimum viable revenue, right? And so when they start thinking about scaling, it's like there's no more resources to scale. So the way that I restructure people's businesses is, I assign one revenue stream financial responsibility for creating stability in someone's business. Because when we can get that one revenue stream performing at that level, creating that financial stability for them, all of the systems that go into that's the thing that creates sustainability in the business model itself. And now that opens up much more capacity to start adding more revenue streams on top that you can then start to scale, or even starting to scale that one revenue stream because you've stabilized it first. And so a lot of times people are like, I want to scale, I want to scale, I want to scale. And it's like, we don't even have a solid foundation. You can't scale anything unless there's a foundation to scale upon. And so I think for me, it's really around the stability component first, which usually entrepreneurs don't like, because I'm slowing them down and building this like brick by brick. But then they're so grateful on the other side, because when you have one revenue stream that is bringing in a whole year of cash flow for you, that's covering all 7 of those key needs that we talked about, that's life changing. Absolutely life changing. You have stability, reliability, all of those things that so many of us crave, that then opens up so much more capacity to scale, and all the strategies that go into that.
And to be willing to take risks, right? Because now you know that the basics are covered. But
so
does that thinking, or does that model apply if, let's say, you have a services business? So I'll just take the example of you're a solo attorney. You've opened your practice, and pick your field of law. How would you approach having that one revenue stream that you can count on to start with?
Yeah, this is where it gets like so custom to the different business models, right? I mean, for an attorney, I would be asking them, what types of cases do you typically take? And which types of cases pay the most? do you enjoy doing those types of cases? Because the enjoyment is also a key piece for how we build the strategy. If the answer is yes, well, how can we reverse engineer your marketing to have more of those cases and fill the pipeline with those cases, right? And the number of cases, how many cases do you need at that level in order for you to generate your minimum viable revenue? So it really starts to clarify what that looks like for them. And then any other cases that come in are just on top of all of that. But it's really starting to laser your focus of like, what are we trying to get the business to do? What are we trying to get to come into the business? And how can we be intentional about the marketing for that to happen?
Yeah, I love that because as a marketer, I find myself always advising business owners to niche down because they always want
Yes.
to do everything. It's like, well, I can do all these things. Well, yes, you could, but then now you look to your potential clients to be a jack of all trades, master of none. And
Yes.
if I'm going to work with, let's say, this attorney. I want the one who has the track record and has the expertise in exactly what I need. And
Absolutely.
I personally don't care about those other things. So when you're small, how do you develop that track record and how do you develop that expertise and those testimonials that are specific to that area? Exactly what you're saying from a financial perspective,
Yeah.
you niche down and you get really
Yes.
good at that thing. And if somebody comes to you with this other tangential thing that you could do, I mean, it's not, you don't have to turn it down. It's just
Yeah.
what you're going to market with. It's your messaging, right?
I could not agree more. I cannot agree more. And there's so many different ways of like you can build affiliate and referral partnerships with people who are doing work that you don't want to do anymore. Like there's so many things. But I think niching, it takes time to really hone. And I think that a lot of people just want that clarity so quickly. And some people are really lucky, but for others, it's a journey. Like you got to try on different types of cases for, this lawyer example, and really kind of get a sense of what is it that you love the most. So then you can go and do more of that. And sometimes it's just experience. It's entrepreneurial maturity to really niche down in a way that feels good. I think that the fear is that you're settling, you're giving things up. And when you niche, it actually doesn't feel like settling at all. It feels like you are doing your best work, walking directly in your purpose. There's nothing more fulfilling than that.
Absolutely. So let's say you're a new entrepreneur just starting out, you've just launched your business. Talk to me about the first 90 days. What should that entrepreneur be doing to build a strong foundation?
I'm going to go straight into the financial foundation because
Of course
I'm
you
a
are. That's what
firm
we're talking
believer.
about is money.
We got to understand what we're trying to get your business to do. And I'm a firm believer, like the earlier you get a financial foundation in your business, the earlier you're really setting yourself up to have a successful trajectory. Because when I started, my business, I had no idea what I was doing. No clue. Like had no concept of numbers. I had no concept of, are my revenue goals even sustainable for me? Like how much money is that really putting into my family's household and all those things? So for a new entrepreneur, I'm going to do a shameless plug. Like you need Dream Money software. That's the tool that's going to really help you understand what your costs are for doing business, what your personal salary really needs to be, what revenue goals you should be pursuing that cover those 7 key financial needs. It's going to help you build out a sustainable revenue plan that can reach those financial targets in the most sustainable way possible. So you're not doing 9 million things and spreading yourself too thin and burning out because we don't need that. It's very easy to do. To casting financial projections so you know what you can anticipate coming into your business every single month when you're executing this strategy. And then also managing the money as it's coming in, because so many of us, we don't have any systems in place. And so we might be making the money, but we have no idea where it went. And that's really hard to really build financial confidence if we don't know how to manage our money. And so we really take a to Z approach with our software of really being holistic in that way from the very beginning, understanding your numbers to how to manage the money as it's coming in. So you're actually funding your dreams. Your money's doing what you want it to do.
And how does Dream Money work exactly? So let's say for those of our listeners who are paying attention and they're they really want to get on top of their finances. Let's say they're
Yeah.
using QuickBooks or whatever else they're using, and maybe they understand it. Maybe it's kind of a lot of gobbledygook, and they don't quite.
Yeah.
They leave it up to they delegate to their bookkeeper and just hope everything's okay at the end of the month. So how does Dream Money shift the way that you
Totally.
look at your financials?
So Dream Money doesn't do any accounting. So accounting is you are categorizing how your money was spent. Dream Money is helping you get clear on how your money is going to be earned. And there is not a tool on the market that does this except for us as it stands right now. We will have competitors because we're brand new. So bookkeeping, you cannot delegate your revenue strategy. A bookkeeper is not going to be able to be a business strategist. And so Dream Money is really filling that gap with helping to kind of be your co-CEO in a sense, and a little bit of your co-CFO, because we're really smart with money. But it's helping you think strategically around what your game plan is. A lot of entrepreneurs are just throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping something sticks. And no wonder we're stressed out financially, because that's really hard to depend on and rely on. And so, Dream Money is very specific in the sense we're helping people create deliberate, reliable, easeful, abundant, meaningful money. Dream is an acronym, right? So for those people who might have accounting, they might have a bookkeeper, they might have a CPA, they're doing a very important role as part of your finance team with making sure your taxes are paid appropriately, making sure they're categorizing your expenses so you have the appropriate write-offs when you go to pay your taxes. They're not helping you on the earnings side. That's on you as a CEO. And so Dream Money is really here to be your accessible tool to help you get really clear on what your strategy and game plan is.
Sounds super valuable. And so for you personally, I mean, you're also an entrepreneur. You've, as you said, you launched a coaching business, you launched a software company, things that don't always go together. You made a pivot from being a psychotherapist to, now being helping to guide entrepreneurs on their finances and on their business. So how do you personally stay grounded and avoid burnout while running a values-based business the way that you do?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, like, there's been many seasons where I have burnt out because I think, and there's been a lot of shame when I've burnt out, honestly. And I think that that's a very normal experience because when we know better, we think we'll do better. And it's taken a long time to really know my capacity and my limits, because your capacity shifts from season to season depending on what's going on in your personal life. And, I've been an active duty military spouse for the grand majority of my entrepreneurial journey. And for anybody who lives that life, on a dime, your partner deploys, your partner goes out of town, and everything shifts to your shoulders. And so all of your business plans that you had, where you thought you had all this time and all this energy and resource, goes right out the window. And you have to learn to pivot and really say, okay, what's my capacity now? And how can you adjust? And so that's been a dance. For the past 10 years of really like honing that and learning to not overcommit to things, learning to give myself more spacious timelines. I'm someone who is very ambitious, and I also live with anxiety, which don't always go hand in hand. And so I've had to really watch that for myself. So I think for me, it's being honest about what's truly realistic. When I know, like, here's everything that's coming down the pipeline in my personal life. So is it really the time to add this launch right now, for instance? And if it is, what resources do you need? What other support do you need for you to be able to do both? Because it is absolutely possible to do it. I do both all the time. So it's hard because capacity is a moving target, and you have to be able to tune in. Like, this season, it's a very micro period of time that we have to assess, and being radically honest with yourself. And sometimes that means saying no to things, which entrepreneurs hate because we want to be able to do it all. But that no is protecting you and saving you, I promise.
Yeah, absolutely. And for all of our listeners who are entrepreneurs and think that they're under a lot of pressure, and there's just a lot that they need to do, and they don't have enough time, like, just listen to what Megan just said about the additional pressure of, imagine that your spouse suddenly leaves for an extended period of time, months and months and months in some cases, maybe longer, and you're worried about whether they're okay, and when and if they're going to be home. And then meanwhile, all of the responsibilities of running the family fall on you in addition to your business. So
Yeah.
that should be, bless all of our military men and women out there and their families, because they go through a hell of a lot for our freedom. So
For
I think
sure.
we all need to be
Thank
very
you.
appreciative, and definitely thank you and your family for your service to us.
Thank you.
So looking forward, what are some of the trends that you see shaping the future of entrepreneurship and online business? Because you pivoted your business to online, or you created it as online, I guess, to start with, because you knew that you needed that flexibility. So what's some of the direction that you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I think AI is definitely here to stay. And when it first came on the scene, I had a lot of qualms with it because I think there were some ethical considerations I was sitting with. So I'm a very, values-based entrepreneur. And also it felt like a whole nother tech tool to learn. And when you have an online business, I mean, you're just, you're required to learn platform after platform after, and it takes so much time and energy to learn it. And so I think I was kind of like, oh, it's just another thing to do. And I don't even know if I like it. And I think the more I've sat with it, I've started to realize there's a lot of ethical ways that you can use AI, and it opens up a lot more capacity and for your business, especially with your team, and allowing you to produce a lot more in a more sustainable way. And sustainability is a very core value of mine. So I think we need to make peace with AI and find our relationship with it and a way to use it. So I think that that's definitely going to be a trend moving forward. I also think that there's going to be a lot more in-person connection. So for all of my online entrepreneurs who've been on Zoom since, I've been on Zoom since 2015. So when COVID happened, everybody's like, have you heard of Zoom? I'm like, yeah, where have you been? It's been my life for a while. But I think in-person connection and community building is really making a comeback. And I think that it's really smart in the unpredictability of this market to diversify your marketing strategy, not have all your eggs in one basket. Our ad costs have gone up substantially with all of these changes. There's more content out there more than ever because of AI. So you want to be sure that you're building real deal relationships with people to help safeguard some of these shifts, because relationships are solid. That is one of the best ways to grow your business, is really having a strong network. And I think online you can build it, but I think in person it happens so much faster. And so I really see those two things being very solid trends as we move into the future.
I couldn't agree more. I think, during COVID, I think a lot of us, got into the idea of like, yay, I can work from home and wearing whatever. And, I can do everything online. And I know that, we had a number of people who are like, oh yeah, I just want to do my thing and just, keep the revenue flowing just through online. And it's like, that's obviously a very important part of your top of funnel strategy. But the idea of human relationships, I think the more we go into, and I totally agree with you on AI, by the way, and one of the greatest ways that we can build efficiencies in our business and build new revenue streams, but we are humans, and humans still want to connect with humans, and I think we
Yeah.
need to remember that, because I know there's networking groups that have gone online and then they've gone back to in person and have been more successful, because there's definitely something to say for the actual human to human contact and
Yeah,
relationship and stronger feeling of accountability. And,
I agree.
that's,
It's been very different. I've really heavily invested in that this past year. I mean, especially with, Dream Money is a huge vision. Like, we're wanting to build $100 million company in 5 years. Like, we have a very, very huge vision of really supporting a need that we see in the market, and knowing just how many women, especially in small business owners, need this. And so if I were to be in my office having this vision and not being able to tell it to a person in real life and just see their reaction, I'm sure I would not have built nearly the confidence that I have this past year of like, no, this is my vision. I'm not afraid to share it. I'm not afraid of your experience of it. And in fact, it's actually been one of the things that I think that's sped up our growth, because people have really rallied around what we're building, and just the feedback that people have gotten, like, I love this idea. I love this need that you're serving for us. It's been like fire for us. It's really poured just fuel on this fire. And I think it's been something we could not have duplicated it online alone.
That's wonderful. And Megan, I mean, this conversation I think has been really fascinating. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm sure that our listeners will get a lot out of it. You've shared so many tips, so much advice. And, I think there's a lot of things for people to just go back and re-listen to and take notes and really think about with their business. But you can't, just like you talked about, it can't all be online. So if someone wants to connect with you directly and maybe
Mhm.
take this a little bit further, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first step is probably much more accessible online, and that's with our MVR calculator. So if you want to calculate your minimum viable revenue, we have a free calculator that will do that for you in like 5 minutes or less. You just put in your inputs and we'll spit out, your unique number, which is always very exciting for people to see. But as Dream Money grows, we're going to be hosting intimate dinner parties in communities all over, the US and Canada. I'm going to Canada just in a couple of weeks. I'm going to Kelowna, BC to host an intimate dinner party with a colleague of mine. And I really want to create these opportunities to hold people's dreams up close, like to share the big dream out loud, share it with someone you respect, share it with people you've just met, because there's nothing more powerful than having a room of people who are witnessing you saying the big brave thing out loud and rallying around you. That's something, I promise you, it grows your dreams at hyper speed. So we'll be releasing more information about upcoming events on the Dream Money website. So that's the best way to stay up to date on all those things. But as long as you go through the minimum viable revenue calculator, you'll be on our email list and you'll get updates on that, or just visit the website and we'll stay in touch that way too. Or
Great.
social. We have Instagram. We just started our Instagram channel. It's brand new. We have like 300 followers. So come say hi.
And we'll put it in the show notes, but what's the website?
It's dreammoney.co.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you so much, Megan. It's truly been a pleasure. And I wish you all the best of success with your business. It sounds like you really landed on a very, very important need for not only women, but for all entrepreneurs in general. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much.